I enjoyed last year's Civilization Beyond Earth for the most part, but I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that there was something missing. The various faction leaders lacked the charisma of Civilization's merry band of historical figures, diplomacy was a bit of a washout, and the game never fully embraced its sci-fi setting. It felt, ultimately, like little more than a reskinned Civ 5. I'm happy to say then that after 2 hours with first expansion Rising Tide, Beyond Earth already feels more like the game I always hoped it would be. So let's start with a standout new feature. You can now create an entirely naval empire by settling cities on the open ocean. In the sea you'll find all new resources and quests, plus an array of new alien lifeforms that would like nothing more than to chew up your unfortunate band of space colonists and spit out the bones. The Kraken takes the place of the Siege Worm as my least favourite new debutante, as unlike its landborn equivalent, it can wander about pretty much wherever it damn well pleases, sinking your precious trade convoys and generally being a great big alien pain in the arse. Here's the dilemma then. Naval factions have a lot more tactical flexibility and manoeuvrability on the open ocean, and they can even pack their bags and move cities across the sea in search of new resources, but at the same time they're more open to attacks, either from human enemies or the local wildlife. Thankfully you do have an all new roster of naval vessels to deploy in the defence of your outposts, including new hybrid affinity units, of which we'll get to shortly. Outside of those new strategic options, there's plenty of new fun stuff to discover at sea. Upon landfall in my new Arctic home, one of the 2 new biome options for creating new maps, I set up shop next to a bizarre creature called a hydrocoral brain, a kind of mental hub that connected various wandering monsters together. There was a whole side quest chain that centred on a scientific investigation of this nightmarish Lovecraftian thing that was slightly too lengthy to explore in my brief preview session. But just encountering it did lend a sense of discovery and wonder that I rarely really felt when playing the core game. Each biome contains a unique version of one of these so-called Marvel quests, and along with a greater quantity of alien life in Rising Tide in general, they make the game world feel more like a mysterious alien planet that it's supposed to be, rather than a slightly sci-fi flavoured facsimile of Earth. By far my biggest problem with Beyond Earth was that opposition leaders in the core game feel almost indistinguishable. Every other faction seemed to be playing pretty much the same game of conquest and expansion, rather than the cultural or science focused approaches that you'd see crop up in a Civ 5 game. Diplomacy did little to add any character to your brief interactions. Thankfully that's something Firaxis has dramatically improved for Rising Tide. First up, every leader in the game now has a series of traits, 1 unique to them and 3 more chosen from political, military and domestic branches. This not only tweaks the benefits each faction gets, but it also unlocks a number of diplomatic agreements that you can make with potential allies. Say I control a large navy, and my trait means I build new vessels faster than anyone else. I can earn diplomatic points by trading on that specialty, handing out a slightly less powerful version of it to an ally. If me and my new friend move from a warm, cooperative stance to the full alliance, this trait gets slightly better. This should encourage a greater connection between you and the various leaders in the game, and make alliances stick a lot more often. It also affords you a great deal of control over how your empire develops, and allows you to use your diplomatic influence to cover shortcomings in your development. In addition, AI factions will like or dislike rivals depending on how they clash with their chosen traits. Environmentalist leaders, for example, will despise those who pack their cities with gas-guzzling, pollution-spewing factories. The diplomatic overhaul adds not just strategic variety, but a badly needed injection of character. Of course, this wouldn't be a new Civilization expansion without a few new faces on the roster. New guys Integer, led by German political figures in opposition to the existing Franco-Iberian faction, earn diplomatics points quicker than their opponents. 3 other factions also debut in Rising Tide. The North Sea Alliance are British and Scandinavian seafarers who specialise in draining extra resources from sea tiles, while the Middle Eastern influence Al-Falah produce more goods from cities, meaning they can build up without focusing quite so much on expansion. The final faction is yet to be announced, but presumably it will also interact with the new mechanics introduced in Rising Tide in an interesting way. In case all that wasn't enough, you've also got new hybrid affinities and artifacts to consider. The former offers players the chance to focus not just on one of the core affinity branches, that's supremacy, harmony and purity, but rather a mix of 2. Heading down this path will unlock entirely new hybrid affinity units that each have their own visual style and abilities, as well as some general perks for your civilization. Artifacts meanwhile can be found out in the wilds and combined in order to unlock hefty resource rewards, or if you put together the correct recipe, unique structures for your towns. There's a lot of new content here, and the impressive variety of new options in Rising Tide makes Beyond Earth feel like the game it should have been at launch. Practically every change it brings makes the core game feel richer and more characterful, and for the first time in a long while I'm actually excited to return to Firaxis Sci-Fi Playground. The expansion's set for release later this fall. For more from GameWatcher, please subscribe to our YouTube channel below or follow us on Twitter at GameWatcherCom.